I never imagined that buying my dream lakeside cabin would reveal the true nature of the people I loved most. After secretly purchasing my sanctuary with my own savings, I thought I finally had a place where I could escape the constant demands and drama. But while traveling for work in Denver, my neighbor Carol sent me videos that shattered my world completely. There was my sister Emma, my brother Jake, and half our extended family celebrating wildly inside my private retreat, treating my sacred space like their personal playground. They were rifling through my belongings, mocking my careful decorating choices, and planning to stay indefinitely. My heart broke as I watched the people I trusted most violate every boundary I had. Let me back up and explain how I ended up in this nightmare. My name is Sue, and I'm 34 years old. For the past 15 years, I've been the family's unofficial bank therapist and crisis manager. As a successful marketing consultant, I make good money, but more importantly, I've always been the responsible one who holds everyone together. My parents divorced when I was 16, and somehow I became the glue that kept our fractured family from completely falling apart. Every holiday happened at my house. Every family emergency became my problem to solve. Every financial crisis somehow required my checkbook to fix. My sister Emma, who's 32, is a struggling artist with 2 kids. She has talent, but she's also incredibly impractical with money. She calls me at least twice a month asking for loans that never get repaid. Last year alone, I gave her $3,000 for various emergencies. My brother Jake is 28 and works as a bartender at a trendy downtown spot. He makes decent tips but spends everything on expensive mountain biking gear and craft beer brewing equipment. He's the charming one who can talk his way out of any responsibility, but he always ends up needing someone to bail him out when his impulsive decisions backfire. Then there's my husband Mark, who's a traveling sales manager for a medical equipment company. He's on the road 3 weeks out of every month, which means I handle most family situations alone. Mark is patient with my family, but I can tell he's getting tired of how they treat me like their personal ATM and emotional support system. The cabin came into my life during one of those solo weekend drives I take to clear my head after particularly draining family crises. I was driving along Lake Harmony about 2 hours from our home in Columbus when I saw the for sale sign. The property was absolutely perfect, a cozy 2-bedroom log cabin sitting on 3 acres of wooded land with 200 feet of private lakefront. The interior had knotty pine walls, a stone fireplace, and windows that overlooked the water from every room. The owner, an elderly man named Robert, was desperate to sell because of health issues. He needed to move closer to his daughter in Florida and couldn't wait for the market to improve. The asking price was reasonable, and I had enough in my savings account plus a personal loan to make it work. For the first time in my adult life, I made a major decision without consulting anyone. I didn't tell Mark because he was in the middle of a crucial sales campaign. I didn't tell my family because I knew they would find ways to make it about them. For 3 months, I've been secretly furnishing and decorating the cabin. Every free weekend, I drive out there with supplies from home improvement stores. I installed new curtains in soft blue and cream colors. I bought comfortable furniture that actually fits my taste instead of compromising with other people's opinions. I stocked the kitchen with my favorite foods and the pantry with ingredients for recipes I never have time to make at home. The cabin represents everything I've been missing: peace, privacy, and a space that belongs entirely to me. No family meetings around my dining table. No relatives showing up unannounced to borrow money or dump their problems in my lap. No pressure to host birthday parties or holiday gatherings. Just silence, nature, and the freedom to be myself without managing everyone else's emotions. I had been looking forward to this business trip to Denver because I planned to spend the following weekend at the cabin alone, reading and relaxing. Mark was going to be in Seattle for a conference, so it seemed like perfect timing for some solitude. But as I was packing my suitcase Wednesday morning, my phone buzzed with a text from Carol, the neighbor who lives in the cabin closest to mine. Carol is a retired teacher in her 60s who keeps an eye on the properties in our area during the week when most owners are in the city. Her message was simple but alarming. "Honey, there are cars in your driveway and people going into your cabin with keys. Should they be there?" My stomach dropped as I stared at her message. I had only given spare keys to one person, my sister Emma. She had visited the cabin once about a month ago when I needed someone to water my plants while I was attending a wedding in Chicago. I specifically told her the key was for emergencies only and that she should always call before using it. During my flight to Denver, I kept checking my phone for updates from Carol. The messages that came through made my anxiety spike higher with each notification. More cars arriving. Music getting louder. Looks like a party. By the time I landed, I had received a text that made my blood run cold. "Sue, I think you need to see this. I'm sending videos." The first video showed my sister Emma's red Honda in my driveway, along with cars I recognized belonging to my brother Jake, my cousin Rachel, and several people I didn't immediately identify. The second video, shot from Carol's kitchen window, showed people carrying coolers and grocery bags into my cabin like they owned the place. But the third video destroyed me completely. Carol had walked closer to get a better view, and through my kitchen window I could see Emma standing in my living room, gesturing dramatically while talking to a group of at least 8 people. She was holding up one of my throw pillows and laughing, clearly making fun of something about my decorating choices. The sound was muffled, but I could make out enough words to understand she was mocking my boring taste and my need to control every little detail. As I sat in my Denver hotel room that first night, Carol continued sending updates. The party was growing larger. Someone had set up speakers on my deck. People were swimming in the lake using my kayaks and fishing equipment. Through my bedroom window, I could see strangers going through my dresser drawers and closet. That's when I realized this wasn't some spur-of-the-moment decision. Someone had been watching my patterns, had planned this invasion, and was treating my sanctuary like their personal vacation rental. Thursday morning brought a new wave of video evidence that revealed the true scope of what was happening to my cabin. Carol had clearly positioned herself as my unofficial surveillance system, and what she captured made my professional meetings in Denver nearly impossible to focus on. The first video of the day showed my brother Jake on my deck at 7 in the morning, cooking what appeared to be a full breakfast on my outdoor grill. He had moved my carefully arranged patio furniture to accommodate a larger dining setup, and I could see that someone had already damaged my deck railing by leaning heavy coolers against it. But it was the second video that revealed how calculated this invasion really was. Carol had zoomed in on my kitchen window, and I could see Emma standing at my counter, rifling through a stack of papers. These weren't random documents. I recognized them immediately as the legal paperwork from my cabin purchase, which I had foolishly left in a folder on my kitchen table during Emma's plant watering visit last month. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Emma had been planning this for weeks. She had seen my mortgage documents, my insurance papers, and my deed. She knew exactly what this property meant to me and had deliberately waited until both Mark and I would be out of town to stage this takeover. Throughout Thursday, Carol's messages painted an increasingly disturbing picture. The group wasn't just partying, they were settling in like permanent residents. Emma had hung her clothes in my closet. Jake had set up his laptop in my home office space. Their cousin Rachel had brought her 2 young children who were jumping on my furniture and writing on my walls with crayons. The worst part was listening to the audio Carol managed to capture when she walked past my open windows during her evening dog walk. Emma wasn't just using my space, she was actively destroying my reputation. I could hear her telling the gathering that I had become selfish and paranoid since my marriage to Mark. She claimed I was hoarding money and property while my family struggled financially. "Sue thinks she's better than us now." Emma's voice carried clearly through the window. "She buys this fancy cabin and doesn't even tell her own family about it. What kind of sister does that Mark has her completely brainwashed into thinking she doesn't owe us anything?" Jake's laughter echoed from my living room as he added his own commentary. "Remember how she used to be fun? Now everything has to be her way or no way. She acts like we're going to destroy her precious things if we touch them." But the conversation that Carol captured around 9 that evening pushed me beyond anger into a cold, calculated fury. Emma had invited people I didn't even know, including Jake's ex-girlfriend Melissa and her new boyfriend Travis. These strangers were in my bedroom going through my personal belongings like they were shopping at a garage sale. "Check this out," I heard Melissa saying through Carol's recording. "She keeps a diary like she's still in high school." The sound of pages turning made my entire body go rigid. They had found my private journal, the one where I write down my thoughts when family situations become overwhelming. My therapist had suggested keeping a record of my feelings to help me process the constant emotional demands my family places on me. "Listen to this." Emma's voice was full of cruel amusement. "I feel invisible most of the time. My family only calls when they need something, but they never ask how I'm doing or what I need. Sometimes I wonder if they would even notice if I disappeared for a month." The group erupted in laughter, and Jake's voice cut through the noise. "Oh my God, she's so dramatic. We notice her plenty. We notice when she's being cheap and selfish." "Here's another one," Emma continued reading. "I love Mark, but sometimes I feel like I'm married to my family instead of to him. Every decision we try to make gets hijacked by some crisis that requires my money or my time. I just want to matter to someone more than what I can do for them. More laughter, more mockery, more casual destruction of my deepest, most vulnerable thoughts shared with people who had no right to hear them." Carol's final video of Thursday night showed the devastating aftermath of this violation. My journal pages were scattered across my bed. Personal letters from Mark were opened and discarded on my nightstand. Photo albums from my wedding were open with pictures scattered across the floor. But the detail that broke something fundamental inside me was visible in the background of Carol's last recording. Someone had used a permanent marker to write "Family Fun Zone" across my bedroom wall, right above the headboard where I had planned to hang a photo of Mark and me from our honeymoon. As I sat in my Denver hotel room staring at the evidence of this systematic destruction, I realized that my family had crossed a line they could never uncross. This wasn't about borrowing money or asking for favors. This was about completely disrespecting my autonomy as an adult and deliberately trying to destroy something that brought me peace. I picked up my phone and called Mark, my hands shaking as I waited for him to answer. When his familiar voice came through the speaker, I started crying so hard I could barely speak. "Sue, what's wrong? Are you hurt?" "Mark." I managed between sobs. "You need to see what my family is doing to our cabin." Mark's initial reaction was exactly what I expected from my practical, level-headed husband. "Sue, honey, slow down. What cabin? What are you talking about?" I had to start from the beginning, explaining about the secret purchase, my need for a private space, and everything that was happening right now. I could hear the confusion in Mark's voice gradually shifting to concern as I sent him Carol's videos one by one. "Wait, you bought a cabin without telling me." His voice carried hurt along with surprise. "Sue, we're married. Don't you think I deserve to know about a major purchase like that?" I know I should have told you. I was going to tell you after this trip. I just needed something that was mine, Mark. Something they couldn't ruin or take away or turn into their latest crisis to fix." The line went quiet for a long moment as Mark processed what I was telling him. I could hear airport announcements in the background. He was waiting for a connecting flight to Seattle. "Send me those videos again," he said finally. "All of them. I want to see exactly what's happening." Over the next hour, as Mark waited for his delayed flight, we stayed on the phone while he watched every piece of evidence Carol had sent. I could hear his breathing change as he witnessed my family's systematic violation of our property and privacy. "Sue, this isn't just disrespectful. What Emma did with your journal, what they're doing to your personal belongings, this is criminal behavior. And the way they're talking about you..." His voice trailed off, and I could tell he was struggling to control his anger. "There's something else," Mark said after another pause. "Something I need to tell you that's going to sound crazy right now, but it's relevant to this situation." My heart clenched. "What do you mean?" "I've been keeping records," Mark admitted, "for months. Every time your family asks you for money, every time they show up unannounced, every time they make you feel guilty for not doing enough for them. I've been writing it all down because I could see how much it was affecting you." I was stunned. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I knew you weren't ready to see it objectively. But Sue, in the past year, alone, you've given your family over $15,000 in direct loans that were never repaid. You've paid for Emma's car repairs twice, Jake's security deposit on his apartment, your mother's plane ticket to visit us, and Rachel's kids' summer camp fees. That's not even counting all the groceries, dinners out, and other expenses you cover when they come over." The numbers hit me like physical blows. I had never added it up because I dealt with each request individually, always telling myself it was just temporary help. "And it's not just money," Mark continued. "They exclude me from family gatherings constantly. They make me feel like an outsider in my own marriage. Your sister has told people at parties that I'm controlling and that I'm trying to isolate you from your family. I've heard her say it with my own ears." Fresh tears started flowing as I realized how much Mark had been enduring in silence, trying to protect my relationship with my family even when they were actively undermining our marriage. "There's something else," Mark said quietly. "Something I've been trying to figure out how to tell you for weeks. My company offered me a promotion that would require us to relocate to Portland. The salary increase would be significant enough that you could cut back your consulting work and focus on projects you actually enjoy. But I haven't said anything because I know you won't leave your family." The weight of everything Mark was telling me felt overwhelming. My family was destroying my cabin, my privacy, and my peace of mind, but they were also preventing me from building the life I actually wanted with my husband. "Mark, I want to hear more about Portland, but first we need to deal with what's happening right now. I can't let them get away with this." Agreed. "And Sue, I'm changing my flight. Instead of going to Seattle, I'm flying back to Columbus and driving straight to that cabin. It's time your family learned that you're not alone in this marriage." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with another message from Carol. This one made my blood pressure spike dangerously high. "Sue, honey, you need to know something. Emma has been talking to people in town, telling them you're having some kind of breakdown and that your family had to stage an intervention because you've been hoarding property and money while they struggle. The cashier at the grocery store asked me if you were okay and if your family was getting you professional help. Emma has been building a story that makes you look mentally unstable and them look like concerned relatives trying to help you." I read Carol's message aloud to Mark, and the silence on his end was more frightening than any angry outburst would have been. Sue and Mark said in a voice I had never heard before, cold and absolutely certain, "Your family just made the biggest mistake of their lives. I'm not just coming to remove them from that cabin. I'm coming to end this pattern permanently." As we hung up so Mark could make his travel arrangements, I realized that everything was about to change. My family had pushed too far, manipulated too much, and underestimated both my resolve and my husband's loyalty. But what they had done to my journal, the way they had mocked my most vulnerable thoughts that felt like a violation I might never forgive. Carol's next message contained the most infuriating update yet. "The party is getting bigger. I counted 12 cars in your driveway now. Someone called the Lake Association office to complain about the noise, but Emma told them she was the property owner and that any complaints should be directed to her. Sue, she's actually claiming to own your cabin." Friday morning brought revelations that transformed my situation from a family boundary violation into something resembling identity theft and fraud. Carol's first message of the day contained information that made me physically ill with rage and betrayal. "Sue, I drove past the cabin early this morning and saw Emma talking to Tom Bradley from the hardware store. He was delivering something to your deck, and when I stopped to chat, he mentioned that Emma had been in the store twice this week buying supplies for her family cabin renovation project. She's been telling people in town that she co-owns the property with you." This was beyond casual lying. Emma was actively constructing a false narrative that positioned her as having legitimate claim to my cabin. But Carol's next message revealed the true scope of my sister's deception. I also ran into Jennifer from the bank this morning at the coffee shop. She asked me to give you her best wishes for your family property management project and mentioned how nice it was that you and Emma were working together to turn the cabin into a family retreat center. Sue Emma has been spreading a completely different story about what this property is supposed to be. My hands were shaking as I called my bank during my lunch break between Denver meetings. What I discovered made me understand that Emma's betrayal was far more calculated and dangerous than I had realized. Ms. Johnson, I need to check if there have been any recent inquiries about my account or my property on Lake Harmony. I told my personal banker, Jennifer. Oh yes, your sister was in on Tuesday asking about adding her name to the property deed. She said you had discussed making it a family-owned vacation rental business, but that you were too busy to come in yourself. She had copies of the property documents and seemed very familiar with the details. The room started spinning around me. Jennifer, I never gave Emma permission to inquire about my property, and I absolutely never agreed to add her name to anything. She doesn't have any legal right to that cabin. Oh my goodness, Sue, I'm so sorry. She was so convincing and she had all the right paperwork. She said you were planning to discuss it with your husband this week and that she was just gathering information for you. We didn't process anything because she didn't have your signature, but she did seem to have copies of your mortgage documents and insurance information. After ending that call, I immediately contacted my mortgage company, my insurance agent, and my credit monitoring service. What I discovered over the next 2 hours revealed the true extent of Emma's planning and manipulation. Emma had somehow obtained copies of multiple confidential documents from my home during her plant watering visit. She had taken photos of my Social Security card, my driver's license, and my bank statements. Over the past 3 weeks, she had used this information to run credit checks under my name and had attempted to contact my mortgage company about family estate planning questions. Most shocking of all, she had visited a different bank branch on Wednesday morning with a man I didn't recognize attempting to use my cabin as collateral for a loan application. The signature on the application looked remarkably similar to mine, but something about the bank's security protocols had flagged the transaction for additional verification, preventing it from being processed immediately. But Emma's financial manipulation was only part of the systematic betrayal I was discovering. My cousin Rachel, who I had always considered one of the more reasonable family members, had been actively participating in building the false narrative about my mental state. Through a series of phone calls to mutual friends, I learned that Rachel had been telling people for weeks that Mark was isolating me from my family, and that I had become paranoid about money and possessive about my belongings. She had even called my office speaking to my assistant under the pretense of planning a surprise birthday celebration, but actually fishing for information about my work travel schedule and personal habits. The most devastating discovery came when I called my elderly uncle Frank, who lives in a retirement community outside Cleveland. Frank has always been like a second father to me, and I couldn't believe he would participate in violating my privacy and property. Uncle Frank, I need to know what Emma told you about the cabin situation. His voice sounded confused and a little defensive. Well, Sue, honey Emma, explained that you've been having a real hard time since your marriage. She said Mark has been controlling your money and preventing you from helping your family when they need it. She told me you bought this cabin to hide assets from him and that the family was worried about your state of mind. My heart broke as I realized that Emma had manipulated even Frank, using his love for me as a weapon against me. She had convinced him that they were staging some kind of intervention to protect me from my own husband. She said you had given them permission to use the cabin while you figured out your marriage problems, Frank continued. She showed me pictures of the place and said you told her the family should feel free to enjoy it since you were too confused to make good decisions right now. The sophistication of Emma's manipulation was breathtaking. She had crafted different stories for different people, always positioning herself as the concerned sister and me, as someone who either couldn't be trusted or needed protection from my own decisions. But the final piece of evidence that arrived Friday evening pushed me beyond anger into a cold, calculating determination to end this permanently. Carol sent me a video that she had taken after walking her dog past my cabin around sunset. In the video, I could see Emma and Jake standing on my deck, having what appeared to be a serious conversation. Carol had managed to get close enough to record their voices, and what I heard destroyed any remaining hope that this situation could be resolved through family communication. "How much longer do you think we can keep this up?" Jake was asking. "As long as we need to," Emma replied confidently. "I've got everyone in town believing that Sue's having some kind of breakdown and that we're here to help stabilize the family property. Tom from the hardware store already thinks I'm the co-owner. If we stay here long enough and act like we belong, it becomes harder for Sue to kick us out even when she gets back." "What about Mark?" "Mark's in Seattle until Sunday. By then we'll have established residency. I looked it up online. Squatters' rights can apply to family property if the actual owner has been neglectful or if there are questions about mental competency." Jake sounded nervous. "Emma, that sounds illegal." "It's not illegal if we're protecting family assets from someone who's making irrational decisions. Besides, Sue owes us this after years of being selfish with her money. She makes 3 times what either of us make, and she acts like helping her own family is some huge burden." The video ended with Emma and Jake going back inside, but I had heard enough to understand that this wasn't just a family boundary issue anymore. Emma was actively trying to steal my property using a combination of manipulation fraud and what amounted to an illegal occupation scheme. As I sat in my Denver hotel room staring at the evidence of my family's betrayal, I realized that my sister had fundamentally misunderstood something crucial about my character. She thought I was weak because I had been generous. She thought I was naive because I had been trusting. But what she had actually done was provide me with irrefutable proof of her real intentions, documented in videos and recorded conversations that would hold up in any legal proceeding. Mark was right. My family had just made the biggest mistake of their lives, and I was about to show them exactly what happened when someone pushed me too far. Mark didn't just walk through the cabin door Saturday afternoon. He orchestrated a carefully planned intervention that began hours before he even arrived at the property. What I didn't know during our Friday night phone conversation was that Mark had been making his own strategic calls while traveling back from Seattle. His first stop wasn't the cabin at all. It was the Lake Harmony Sheriff's Department where his high school friend, Deputy Tom Martinez, was working the weekend shift. Mark presented Tom with all the evidence Carol had gathered along with documentation, proving my sole ownership of the property and records showing that none of the current occupants had permission to be there. "This isn't just trespassing," Tom told Mark as they reviewed the videos. "What your sister-in-law is doing with the false ownership claims and the attempted loan fraud, that's criminal behavior. We need to document this properly." Mark's second stop was even more strategic. He visited Carol personally, thanking her for protecting my interests and asking if she would be willing to serve as an official witness to whatever confrontation was about to happen. "I've been watching that poor girl get taken advantage of by her family for months," Carol told Mark. "Someone needs to stand up for Sue, and if that someone is you, then I'm happy to help." So when Mark finally arrived at the cabin Saturday afternoon around 3 o'clock, he wasn't alone. Deputy Martinez followed him in an official vehicle, and Carol walked over from her property carrying a folder full of printed photographs and timestamps documenting the entire weekend's activities. The family's reaction to seeing Mark was immediate and telling. Instead of embarrassment or apologies, Emma's first response was anger that Mark was interfering in family business. She stormed out of the cabin onto the deck, where at least 10 people were still lounging around like they owned the place. "Mark, what are you doing here?" Emma demanded. "Sue said you were in Seattle until Sunday." "Sue says a lot of things, Emma. Just like you've been saying a lot of things to people in town about owning this property and Sue having mental health problems." Emma's face went pale, but she recovered quickly. I don't know what you're talking about. We're just using the family cabin for a little reunion weekend. Sue told me we could use it anytime we wanted. That's when Mark pulled out his phone and began playing the audio recording that Carol had captured the night before, where Emma clearly outlined her plan to establish squatters' rights and claim the property through manipulation and fraud. Funny thing about that conversation, Emma. Turns out you were standing right next to a window when you explained your illegal scheme to Jake. Carol here recorded the whole thing. The effect on the gathered family was immediate and dramatic. Jake went completely silent, staring at the ground. Rachel grabbed her children and started gathering their belongings without saying a word. Uncle Frank looked confused and hurt clearly, beginning to understand that he had been lied to about the entire situation. But Emma wasn't finished. Even confronted with evidence of her own words, she tried to maintain control of the narrative. "You're taking that conversation completely out of context," she insisted. "We're worried about Sue. She's been acting paranoid and secretive, making major financial decisions without consulting her family. Buying this place in secret was just the latest example of how she's been pulling away from people who love her." People who love her. Mark repeated, his voice dangerously calm. "Is that why you've been telling everyone in town that I'm controlling and abusive? Is that why you tried to forge Sue's signature on a loan application using this cabin as collateral? Is that why you've been spreading rumors about her mental health to justify stealing her property?" Emma's mouth opened and closed without any sound coming out. She clearly hadn't expected Mark to know about the bank incident. Deputy Martinez stepped forward with his official documentation. "Ma'am, I need to see some identification and ask you a few questions about your legal relationship to this property." "This is ridiculous," Emma sputtered. "This is a family matter, not a police matter." "Ma'am, attempted loan fraud is absolutely a police matter. Identity theft is a police matter. Filing false ownership claims is a police matter. So I'm going to need you to answer some questions honestly, and I'm going to need everyone who doesn't have legal permission to be on this property to gather their belongings and leave immediately." That's when Jake finally spoke up, and what he said shocked everyone present. "Emma, just stop. Please, just stop." His voice was shaky and defeated. "I can't do this anymore. You told me Sue had given us permission to be here. You told me this was just about family sharing resources. But I heard you on the phone with that loan officer, Emma. I know what you were really trying to do." Emma spun around to face Jake with fury in her eyes. "Shut up, Jake. You don't understand the bigger picture here. The bigger picture is that you're trying to steal our sister's property." Jake's voice cracked with emotion. "And you've been lying to everyone, including me, about what this was really about. I thought we were just having a family weekend. I didn't know you were planning to claim squatters' rights or forge documents or any of this crazy stuff." Mark stepped closer to Emma, and when he spoke, his voice carried an authority I had never heard from him before. "Here's what's going to happen, Emma. Everyone is leaving this property immediately. Deputy Martinez is going to file a formal trespassing report. I'm going to document every single item that's been damaged or moved. And then Sue and I are going to decide whether to press criminal charges for fraud, identity theft, and attempted property theft." "You can't do this," Emma said desperately. "Sue would never let you destroy her family like this." Mark smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. "Emma, you seem to be operating under a fundamental misunderstanding about my wife. Sue isn't weak just because she's been generous with you. She isn't naive just because she's been trusting. And she isn't going to forgive you just because you're family." He pulled out his phone and showed Emma the screen. "In fact, Sue has been watching this entire conversation through video call. She's been listening to every word you've said. Sue, would you like to tell your sister how you feel about her attempt to steal your property?" Emma's face went white as she realized I had been witnessing her complete exposure in real time. But Mark wasn't done revealing the extent of his preparation for this confrontation. "There's one more thing you should know, Emma. Sue's journal entries that you read out loud to humiliate her. Those weren't random thoughts about feeling unappreciated. Sue has been seeing a therapist for months, documenting the pattern of emotional and financial manipulation this family has been subjecting her to. Her therapist suggested she keep detailed records as preparation for setting permanent boundaries. Emma's legs seemed to give out slightly and she grabbed the deck railing for support. This whole situation wasn't Sue being naive or trusting, Mark continued relentlessly. This was Sue giving her family one final opportunity to show their true character. You've been under surveillance and documentation for months, and every single thing you've done this weekend has been recorded as evidence of your real intentions towards someone who has done nothing but try to help you for years. The silence that followed Mark's revelation was broken only by the sound of car doors slamming as various family members loaded their belongings and left without saying goodbye. Emma stood frozen on the deck, finally understanding that she had been completely outmaneuvered by the people she had underestimated. But the most shocking revelation was still to come, and it would arrive when I finally made it back to the cabin myself. I arrived at the cabin Sunday morning not as a victim racing to salvage what remained of my violated sanctuary, but as someone who had spent the weekend methodically dismantling my family's ability to ever manipulate me again. My flight from Denver had been delayed, which gave me additional time to coordinate with my lawyer, my bank, and the local authorities. Emma was still at the cabin when I arrived, though most of the other family members had scattered after Mark's confrontation the day before. She was sitting alone on my deck, surrounded by the debris of her failed scheme, empty beer bottles, cigarette butts, and the remains of what had clearly been days of treating my property like their personal resort. When she saw my car pulling into the driveway, Emma stood up with what looked like relief on her face. I think she genuinely believed that seeing her looking defeated and remorseful would trigger my usual instinct to comfort family members in distress. She was about to learn how fundamentally she had misunderstood who I had become. "Sue, thank God you're here," Emma started as I walked up to the deck. "This whole thing got way out of hand. Mark completely overreacted yesterday, and I think there's been a huge misunderstanding about what we were doing here." I looked at my sister calmly taking in the damage to my property and the casual way she was still treating my space like it belonged to her. Then I pulled out a folder of documents that I had been carrying since leaving the Denver airport. "Emma, you're right that there's been a misunderstanding, but the misunderstanding is yours about who I am and what I'm willing to tolerate." I opened the folder and began laying papers on my patio table. "These are restraining orders, one for you, one for Jake, and one for Rachel. You are legally prohibited from coming within 500 feet of this property or my primary residence. Violation of these orders will result in immediate arrest." Emma's face went through several color changes as she processed what I was saying. "Sue, you can't be serious. We're family." "This is a fraud complaint I filed with the sheriff's department yesterday evening." I continued placing another document on the table. "It details your attempt to forge my signature on loan documentation and your systematic impersonation of a property co-owner to multiple businesses in town." "And this," I said, placing a final set of papers on the table, "is a bill for property damages, cleanup costs, and the professional security system I'm having installed tomorrow. The total comes to $8,700, which happens to be almost exactly the amount of money I've loaned you over the past 2 years that you never repaid." Emma's composure finally cracked completely. "Sue, please, you have to understand, I'm in real trouble. I owe money to some very dangerous people, and I thought maybe if I could just get a loan against this place, I could pay them back and start over." For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something like pity for my sister. But it was a very different kind of pity than the enabling sympathy that had controlled my decisions for years. "Emma, I understand that you're in trouble, but your solution was to steal from me, lie about me, and destroy something that brought me peace. Your problems don't justify violating me." "But I'm your sister," Emma said desperately. "Doesn't that mean anything to you?" Mark appeared in the cabin doorway behind me carrying a cup of coffee and looking more relaxed than I had seen him in months. Emma being Sue's sister, means you should protect her, not exploit her. It means you should celebrate her successes, not resent them. It means you should respect her boundaries, not violate them systematically. Emma turned her attention to Mark with renewed anger. This is all your fault. Sue used to care about her family before you started filling her head with ideas about boundaries and independence. That's when I realized Emma still didn't understand what had really happened here. Emma, Mark didn't change me. You changed me. Every time you asked for money without paying it back, you changed me. Every time you excluded Mark from family events, you changed me. Every time you treated my home like a crisis center for your problems, you changed me. This weekend was just the final proof I needed that you were never going to respect me as an adult. I sat down at my patio table and looked directly at my sister. I want to tell you something that might be hard for you to hear, but I think you need to understand it. I've been seeing a therapist for 8 months, Emma. Not because I was having a breakdown, but because I was finally ready to examine why my family relationships felt so exhausting and one-sided. Emma's eyes widened as she began to understand the implications of what I was saying. My therapist helped me realize that healthy families don't operate the way ours does. Healthy families don't have one person who pays for everything and manages everyone else's emotions. Healthy families don't exclude spouses from gatherings or mock each other's vulnerabilities for entertainment. Healthy families respect boundaries and celebrate each other's independence. I pulled out one final document from my folder. This is a letter from my therapist documenting months of sessions where I describe the pattern of financial and emotional manipulation I've experienced from you, Jake, Rachel, and even Mom. Every loan request, every guilt trip, every violation of my privacy and autonomy has been documented as part of my therapeutic process. Emma stared at the letter with growing horror. You've been building a case against us for months. I've been protecting myself for months, I corrected. And this weekend was your opportunity to prove that my concerns were unfounded. Instead, you proved that my therapist was right about everything. Mark sat down next to me and I could feel his solid presence supporting me through this conversation. Emma Sue gave your family every chance to show respect for her boundaries. She set up this cabin as a private space and told you it was for emergencies only. She could have called the police the moment she received those videos, but instead, she gave you multiple opportunities to leave voluntarily. Even yesterday, I added, when Mark arrived with Deputy Martinez, you could have apologized, cleaned up, and left with some dignity intact. Instead, you doubled down on your lies and tried to manipulate the situation even further. Emma was crying now, but I noticed that her tears felt different to me than they had in the past. Instead of triggering my usual impulse to comfort and fix her problems, they simply confirmed that she was finally experiencing consequences for her choices. Sue, please, Emma said through her tears. I know I messed up, but I can't lose you. You're the only stable thing in my life. I felt a deep sadness as I responded, but also a strange sense of freedom. Emma, I was never stable for you. I was enabling for you. There's a difference. Stability would be helping you build skills to solve your own problems. What I was doing was solving your problems for you, which prevented you from ever learning how to manage your own life. I stood up and began walking toward my cabin door. The restraining orders are in effect immediately. If you need to communicate with me about legal or financial matters related to this incident, you can contact my lawyer. Her information is in the paperwork. What about family holidays? Emma asked desperately. What about birthdays and family gatherings? Mark answered for me. Emma, Sue, and I are moving to Portland in 2 months. My company offered me a promotion there, and we've decided to accept it. We're going to start fresh in a place where Sue's family can't manipulate community opinion or pressure her into making decisions based on guilt. The look of shock on Emma's face told me that she had never considered the possibility that her actions might result in permanently losing access to me. You're abandoning your family, she whispered. I'm choosing my family, I replied calmly. My family is Mark and the people who love me without expecting me to sacrifice my well-being for their convenience. You're my sister Emma, and I hope someday you'll get the help you need to build healthy relationships, but I'm not available to be your crisis manager anymore." As I walked into my cabin, I could hear Emma crying on the deck behind me. But for the first time in my adult life, someone else's emotional distress didn't automatically become my responsibility to fix. Mark had already packed Emma's belongings and loaded them into her car while we talked. Within an hour, she was gone. The cabin was damaged, but it was mine again. More importantly, my life was mine again. 6 months later, I'm sitting on the deck of our Portland apartment looking out at the Columbia River and reflecting on how completely my life has transformed since that weekend at Lake Harmony. The cabin still exists, and we still visit it occasionally, but it's no longer my sanctuary because I no longer need a hiding place from my own family. The legal resolution of Emma's fraud attempt was swift and decisive. With all the video evidence Carol had gathered, plus the bank's documentation of the attempted loan fraud, Emma faced serious criminal charges. However, I ultimately decided to accept a plea agreement that required her to enter financial counseling, attend therapy, focused on boundary respect and family dynamics, and agree to no contact with me for a minimum of 2 years without written permission. Jake's part in the cabin invasion was less calculated but still required consequences. He paid full restitution for the property damage and agreed to attend counseling sessions focused on enabling behaviors and family dysfunction. Unlike Emma, Jake has actually followed through with his therapy commitment, and I've received progress reports from his counselor indicating genuine effort to understand his role in our unhealthy family patterns. My cousin Rachel faced professional consequences when her employer learned about her participation in spreading false rumors about my mental health. As a school teacher, she's held to higher standards regarding gossip and character assassination. She was required to issue formal apologies to everyone she had lied to and complete sensitivity training about mental health stigma. Rachel has requested permission to write me a letter of apology, which I may consider reading in another year or two. Uncle Frank was the one family member who received immediate forgiveness once I understood how thoroughly Emma had manipulated him. Frank genuinely believed he was participating in a family intervention to help me through a difficult time. When he learned the truth about Emma's fraud and manipulation, he was devastated and immediately offered to testify against her if needed. Frank and I exchange occasional letters now, and he's expressed pride in how I've learned to protect myself. My mother Betty's response to the entire situation revealed the depth of the family dysfunction I had been enabling for years. Instead of being horrified by Emma's behavior, Betty was angry with me for destroying family unity by pressing charges and setting boundaries. Her reaction confirmed my therapist's assessment that the family's problems went much deeper than individual behavior patterns. The move to Portland exceeded every expectation Mark and I had for our fresh start. Mark's promotion came with a salary increase that allowed me to be more selective about my consulting clients, focusing on projects that genuinely interest me, rather than taking every contract to maintain my family funding obligations. I've discovered that I actually enjoy my work much more when I'm not constantly stressed about having enough money to cover the next family crisis. Mark and I have built a social circle of people who respect boundaries and support each other's growth rather than exploiting each other's generosity. We've learned that healthy relationships involve reciprocity, mutual respect, and shared responsibility, rather than one person carrying the emotional and financial load for everyone else. Most importantly, I've learned to distinguish between love and enabling. Love supports people in becoming their best selves. Enabling prevents people from developing the skills they need to manage their own lives. For years, I thought I was showing love by solving my family's problems, but I was actually preventing them from learning how to solve their own problems. My therapist helped me understand that setting boundaries wasn't cruel. It was necessary for everyone's emotional health. When I stopped rescuing Emma from the consequences of her financial decisions, I forced her to develop her own coping strategies. When I stopped mediating family conflicts, I allowed other family members to learn direct communication skills. When I stopped hosting every gathering, I gave other people opportunities to contribute to family relationships. The cabin at Lake Harmony has become something different than I originally intended. Instead of a hiding place from my family, it's become a retreat where Mark and I go to reconnect with each other and plan our future together. We've made new friends among the neighbors, particularly Carol, who visits us in Portland occasionally and has become a wonderful surrogate grandmother figure. Carol often mentions how much happier and more confident I seem now compared to the stressed, overwhelmed person she first met. She says it's like watching someone finally step into their own life instead of living as a supporting character in everyone else's drama. Emma has attempted to contact me several times through mutual friends and distant relatives, claiming she's changed and wants to rebuild our relationship. My therapist has advised me to evaluate any future relationship with Emma based on her actions over time rather than her promises during crisis moments. So far, Emma's actions have focused on trying to find ways around the no-contact order rather than demonstrating the consistent behavioral changes that would indicate genuine transformation. Jake has made more substantial progress. His counselor reports that he's developed budgeting skills, stopped asking friends and family for financial bailouts, and is working to understand how his enabling behavior contributed to Emma's escalating manipulation. In another year, if his progress continues, I may be open to limited contact focused on building a healthier adult-sibling relationship. The most unexpected result of this entire experience has been discovering how many people in my extended social circle had observed my family's treatment of me, but hadn't felt comfortable saying anything. Friends, colleagues, and even neighbors had noticed the pattern of exploitation, but assumed I was choosing to enable it. When I began setting boundaries and protecting myself, I received an outpouring of support from people who expressed relief that I had finally recognized my own worth. Mark and I are planning to start our own family soon, and I'm confident that our children will grow up understanding the difference between love and manipulation. They'll learn that healthy relationships involve mutual respect, clear communication, and appropriate boundaries. They'll see their parents modeling a marriage based on partnership and equality rather than one person sacrificing their needs for everyone else's comfort. The cabin will remain in our family as a retreat space, but it will also serve as a reminder of the importance of protecting what brings you peace. I've installed security systems and changed all the locks, not because I'm paranoid, but because I've learned that trust must be earned through consistent, respectful behavior over time. Sometimes I wonder if Emma will ever truly understand what she lost through her actions that weekend. She didn't just lose access to my money and emotional support. She lost the opportunity to have a genuine relationship with someone who genuinely loved her. Her manipulation and fraud didn't just violate my property. They destroyed the foundation of trust that any healthy relationship requires. But I've also learned that I can't control other people's choices or their understanding of consequences. I can only control my own responses and boundaries. Emma's failure to respect my autonomy taught me how to value my autonomy. Her attempts to steal from me taught me how to protect what's mine. Her manipulation taught me how to recognize authentic versus exploitative relationships. The life lesson that emerged from this painful experience is that sometimes the people who claim to love us most are the people we most need protection from. Love doesn't demand sacrifice of your well-being for someone else's comfort. Love doesn't require you to enable destructive behavior or tolerate manipulation. Love doesn't ask you to set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. Real love celebrates your boundaries because it wants you to thrive as an individual. Real love supports your growth, even when that growth changes the dynamic of the relationship. Real love respects your autonomy and your right to make decisions about your own life, money, and property. I learned that saying no to exploitation isn't selfish. It's essential for your emotional survival. Setting boundaries isn't about punishment. It's about creating space for authentic, healthy connections to develop. Protecting yourself from manipulation isn't about abandonment. It's about refusing to participate in relationships that require you to diminish yourself for someone else's benefit. The cabin at Lake Harmony taught me that everyone deserves a sanctuary, whether it's a physical space or simply the emotional peace that comes from knowing your boundaries will be respected. Everyone deserves relationships that add value to their life, rather than constantly demanding their resources. Everyone deserves to feel appreciated for who they are, rather than what they can provide. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where family members or close friends took advantage of your generosity? How did you learn to set boundaries with people who expected unlimited access to your time, money, or emotional energy? Share your story in the comments below because your experience might help someone else recognize their own worth and learn to protect their peace. If this story resonated with you, please like this video to help others find it. Subscribe to our channel for more stories about overcoming family manipulation and building healthier relationships. Share this video with anyone who might be struggling to set boundaries with exploitative family members, because sometimes we all need reminding that protecting ourselves isn't selfish. It's necessary. Thank you for listening to my story and for being part of a community that believes everyone deserves relationships built on mutual respect and genuine love. I hope you have the courage to protect your own sanctuary and the wisdom to recognize the difference between people who love you and people who need you. Remember, you are worthy of relationships that celebrate your boundaries rather than constantly testing them.